The Purdue Boilermakers couldn't spoil Penn State's trip to Indiana on Saturday as the Nittany Lions defeated Purdue 49-12. On Nittany Nation Overtime, we discussed the win and Tyler Warren's standout season, plus plenty of young guys got their feet wet and a whole lot more coming up next.
The money is talking, I'm flowing, it's coming in just how I do it. Yeah, you know what it is. Hey, we doing it big. Look up, there's no limit, no, we cannot settle for this. Yeah, can't stop, nah, won't stop. Yeah, it's been on live. You don't believe it, just watch.
Hello and welcome into Nittany Nation Overtime. I'm Riley Holsinger, joined alongside by Mark Brennan, Neil Rudel, and Shane McGregor. Big win for Penn State on the road. I think it's probably what everybody expected. Neil, what was your takeaways from the game?
Well, I mean, the season is on schedule. I mean, they took care of business out there. They got a lot of guys involved. They may have had an injury or two, but not to the starters. You can look at this in the rearview mirror all the time with what if this or that, but I think at 9-1, poised at number 4, and if they can finish strong, this season has a chance to be everything that we all thought it could be.
I know Neil's riled up, but welcome to Riley,
yes.
First time hosting. You're officially a nitwit now, whether you like it or not. Neil hit it right on the head. I mean, you're in taking care of business mode now, and that may sound cliche, but if you look around the college football world, you see teams either losing outright or struggling mightily. So to be able to go on the road in the Big Ten anywhere at this time of year and win the way they did, stay relatively healthy, as you mentioned, a couple of the backups got banged up, but your key guys are very healthy going into this final 2-game stretch. Everything's right there for you. It's still right there for you. You got some younger guys some playing time, so I think it went about as well as you could imagine.
Most definitely. It's how are you winning too. It's one of those things where you gotta, you can win a game a bunch of different ways, but if you're playing well, that's what you want.
Yeah, does it give you more confidence, Shane, as a team whenever you're able to have a blowout like how you did against Purdue?
Yeah, I'd say, those first 2 drives were like the statement makers, especially on offense, where it was like pretty much doing what you wanted no matter what, outside of maybe one negative play, that was it. When you can come out and actually execute your game plan as much as you can. I mean, obviously Purdue is not Ohio State or some a high level team in the Big Ten, but it's still a college football team. It's still on the road. It's still the Big Ten, and you got to go out and execute. If you want to do that, then that builds the momentum.
Yeah, a couple of things I would say, Neil, is that that fan turnout was actually really good.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's because there was a lot of Penn State fans there, but the place was almost packed for the first half. So to be able to come out and play well there, I was shocked that Purdue deferred, because that is not a good defense. And I think your one shot, you saw what they did against Illinois. They lost 50-49 in overtime. So they could get things rolling offensively. By the time they were able to blink, they're down 14-0. And I just thought that was a colossal mistake. But to your point, Shane, give them all the credit in the world, Penn State, for coming out. We've seen slow starts. That was not the case. The other thing, I don't know how it happens, and Shane, maybe you could help me with this. I don't know how the first, 2 of the first 4 plays or whatever go to Tyler Warren, and he's wide open. How could he possibly be wide open?
They played so much man coverage where you would think, hey, if we're going to take one guy away, it's got to be him, right? It's one of those things. But I guess if you scheme him up the right way, if you put him in different spots like they do.
Well, that speaks to the myriad of problems that Purdue is having. It's probably a separate show. I mean, there's a lot.
In West Lafayette, they're talking about that right now.
They finally throw a touchdown pass, and the guy is out of the end zone because there's a double line there to confuse Purdue. But back to your point, I think Penn State for the last 2 weeks has been really decisive on offense, fast starts, getting Warren involved, and spreading the field and kind of getting back to the offense that we saw a little bit earlier in the year.
Well, and it goes back to learning from your mistakes. As you said, listen, no fan wanted to see what happened against Ohio State, but the worst thing they could have done was let Ohio State beat them twice. Again, I know it's a cliche, but they learned from it. And I think Andy Kotelnicki really learned from it. I mean, you look at what happened late in that Ohio State game and everything that's gone on since then, he's pushed all the right buttons. He's been aggressive. He's gotten the ball to Tyler Warren, which makes a lot of sense, and he's beaten teams in different ways.
And we've seen a lot of creativity so far, too, with how Tyler Warren's been utilized. I mean, you saw it with the play where Warren passed it to Drew Aller. Then back to Warren. He ended up having that huge gain there. Shane, I'm going to ask you this. Do you think Tyler Warren should be in the Heisman conversation after a game where he had 190 total yards and a couple touchdowns?
I'd say 100%. And it's one of those things where he's not, if you actually look what's going on, yes, the razzle-dazzle plays show out and obviously his receptions, but he's point of attack blocking. Like, he sets the edge for like run plays to his side. I mean, they line him up in so many different places. Like, he's not one of those tight ends that, I just catch the passes and stuff like that. No, like, he's doing everything. He's a football player. And as far as value, as far as what makes an offense go, he might be the most valuable one in the country compared to what he does for the offense.
Super kid and leader. Would have helped them if he was sailed over the top against Ohio State and they'd be sitting here as an undefeated team. They only invite 4, I'm pretty sure, to New York. He'll be in the conversation, which is a real credit to him and how they've used him.
Neil, do you think he should be in the conversation?
I absolutely think he should be in the conversation. To Shane's point, you're looking at somebody who, if you were to evaluate who the most valuable player is to their team in college football, there's obviously a guy at Colorado who's right there as well. But I don't know, between him and Tyler Warren, I mean, just the things that he does. And again, it's not just the catching of passes. They need somebody to get a tough first down. I think he has 16 carries, 10 of them are for first downs, 4 are for touchdowns. Their running game was struggling a little bit against Purdue. They stay committed. Who breaks it open? Tyler Warren. They need a big play against Ohio State. Who brings it down to the 3-yard line? Tyler Warren. So he's not just making plays, he's doing it in critical situations.
K-Tron's first touchdown. All right, Tyler Warren pretty much is the decoy, but clears it out, he walks in.
Absolutely. And I got to apologize to you, Mark. I accidentally called you Neil there.
I've been called much worse. I've been called much worse. Not much worse, but...
But speaking of Neil, we have to go pay Neil's salary, so we'll be back here in a couple minutes. But we're going to talk a lot more about Penn State's win over Purdue.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Riley Holsinger, Mark Brennan, Neil Rudel, and former Penn State quarterback Shane McGregor joining us to talk about the win against Purdue. We saw 68 total players get reps against Purdue, something that's really big, Neil.
Yeah, I think a couple of the young guys that I've noticed that are starting to, emerge a little bit. I've been impressed with Zion Tracy. I think he's come up aggressively and caught some of these punts. He played well on defense as well. And Denmark, I know they're holding him out, and I guess you can clarify. I guess they're trying to still redshirt him, but he added a burst.
Yeah, I mean, he also had a pass thrown to him that he didn't really see coming, and that's the one thing. I mean, a guy like Ivy is wide open for a touchdown. These guys haven't gotten opportunities, and Shane, you know this. I mean, when you get your chance, you may not get another chance in this kind of season. And that was the one thing where, they brought the backup linebackers in on the 3rd defensive series, which I liked because you're really worried about the depth there, and they struggled. And so there are still some question marks. So as good as it was to get a lot of these young players reps, some of them weren't able to quite seize it. So I don't know if they're going to get more opportunities. The one guy I wanted to give a shout out to, or my heart goes out to, is Jalen Harvey, because he's a guy who really didn't get an opportunity to play for a lot of the season. Highly ranked defensive end. They were looking to redshirt him, and it looked like he had a pretty significant injury. We don't know that as we speak now. We'll monitor it, but I hope that he's okay. That's the one thing you didn't want to see in that game, was anybody get hurt, and unfortunately he got banged up.
Yeah, we'll probably find out a little bit more about that on Monday, although James Franklin doesn't go into depth about injuries at all. Shane, just talk about who stood out in your eyes that isn't the Tyler Warrens and the Drew Allers of the world.
I like how, this might not be a player-wise, I like how Kotelnicki. All right, I like how things are coming together with how you're using your personnel. All right, in the sense where people think about like this is the 2024 season. You're a much different team than you are in week 1. All right, you progress, you get more familiar as a first-time play caller with the group that he has around him, like how to put guys in the best situation. We can bemoan the fact that maybe we don't have this or we don't have that, but you have what you have, and then a play caller's job is supposed to get the ball to where it needs to get to. And if it's heavy on one end and heavy on the other, okay, but it's like I think that is probably my most impressive thing from yesterday.
Shane, can I follow up on something I mentioned before? because I asked you, how does Aller get so wide, or how does Warren get so wide open? So I asked Drew Aller that after the game, and he said a lot of it is because of the pre-snap motion that they do, that it kind of confuses. And Drew Shelton, the offensive lineman, said they could actually hear the opposing defense being confused, not go. Take us through that as a quarterback.
Well, okay, so if you somebody like Warren, if you line him up way outside, well, okay, if you're playing a lot of man coverage, are you going to match him with a linebacker and put a linebacker out wide? Are you playing with a corner? All right, and then once all of a sudden, obviously, the coverage indicators come with any sort of motion that you use. So then, and also too, just the shifting of things. Or if you have a guy that lines up in so many different spots, you don't have much time to finally diagnose it, call it, get ready for it. And obviously, if he's a good enough athlete, like Tyler Warren's route running. All right, he might not be the fastest guy ever, but you don't need to be a fast guy. You need to be able to run routes. Like even things like that spring you open like that.
That's why we have a quarterback on here. This is why we have a quarterback.
Perfect timing, because I was kind of curious yesterday. I thought maybe it would be an opportunity for Grunkmeyer at the end for a series or two. They've talked highly of him, and you're up big. Yeah. What about that?
I'd say reps are gold. Like you can say what you want about practice. Practice matters so much, but it's not the game. And it's one of those things where until you're out there, and I know it might even be in a blowout or anything, but like you really get a chance to see what is it like playing against another live team. Spring practice, fall practice, camp, practice throughout the week, all very important, but it's not a game. And it's one of those things where those reps matter a lot. You play do we want to risk an injury? Do we not? It's always up to just kind of what you kind of feel as far as the coaching staff goes, but game reps, no matter who they go to, are gold.
To play devil's advocate, Neil, Bo Pribula doesn't get that many opportunities. And I wonder if Ivy catches that pass and is able to score, if maybe, he's able to get in there and have some success, maybe they go to Grunkmeyer a little bit toward the end of the game. That's going to be a good question for James Franklin this week, because I'm sure I was down there on the field and Grunk was warming up. And those kids just don't start warming up for no reason. Right. It's typically, hey, we might be going to you here, and maybe just the way it played out. But I do agree, listen, you're one injury away, knock on wood that it doesn't happen, from him being your backup quarterback. And I think you would want to have him.
Yeah, not only that, but you're starting to look ahead. I mean, if Aller leaves after this year and Pribula is the starter, I mean, you're going to be searching for some kind of an experienced backup as well.
And that's a great question too, Mark. Do you think that Drew's going to leave right now? I mean, his draft stock's been pretty fluid, but I think we know Drew well enough to tell you that he's going to probably be a good guy that's going to be good in the post-draft process, where he's going to do great in interviews, probably do great in testing.
I would not be shocked if he comes back. I really wouldn't. I mean, I think this is a guy who he's never been about getting to the league as quickly as possible. He's had a really good year. I would have to take a harder look at what quarterbacks are coming out this year and next year, but I just don't think that he's somebody. He reminds me of Olu in the sense that even if he were projected high, he may want to stick around for another year, get his degree, do those things. I don't know for sure, but I would not be stunned. I think there are some kids on this team that you see that they're, Abdul Carter, I think, if you're going to be a top 5 pick, you got to go and get it done. But with Aller, I just don't have a great sense for it, but I would not be surprised if he returns.
I mean, I would have to think a lot of that is really all in flux and on the table, depending on how he finishes, they finish. If they get to the playoff and he does well, where his stock may be. I think it's probably a real fluid situation.
And the decision, eventually it will come, but what I love is his improvement. There was one, I'd say, play that's the biggest microcosm of it. It was like the first drive, I think, second down. Instead of waiting back there, pressure collapsing on him, he climbs the pocket, gets back to set up like a 3rd and 9, and that sets up the eventual Tyler Warren deep out that springs the whole drive. Something as small as that, not taking a sack is a super negative play, not gunning it into some coverage and turning it over, something like that. Something as small as that, to do it and do it over and over and over again, that shows the development of a future NFL prospect. Whenever that will be.
17 of 19, and one of them was a drop by Kaytron Allen, and it's like you see so many great performances in that game. I felt bad for Abdul Carter because I think his numbers were kind of stymied by the lack of holding calls, but he was still spectacular out there. But I think what Aller's doing is almost flying under the radar because of how good Warren is.
Yeah, and Codell Nicky has gotten a lot of credit, deservedly so, for the play calls. But Danny O'Brien obviously has had a nice touch on this kid.
Well, awesome, great stuff, guys. We still have a lot more to tackle right here on Nittany Nation Overtime as we take a look at Penn State's position in the newly expanded college football playoff.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Well, ever since the college football playoff was going to expand from 4 teams to 12 teams, we've always said that Penn State was going to probably be the biggest benefactor of that. Right now, Neil, they don't even need the expanded college football playoff, sitting at number 4 in the AP poll.
I mean, I'm watching Oregon and Wisconsin, and you're thinking, if Wisconsin wins this game, does this put Penn State back in the conversation for the Big Ten title game? And do you really even want that?
Right, yeah.
But apparently there's a lot of caveats, and of course Oregon made it a moot point. Got to give Oregon credit. It's tough up at Camp Randall, but Penn State was more impressive against Wisconsin than Oregon was.
Oh, I completely agree with you right there. And I mean, who would have thought that 4 Big Ten teams would be in the top 5 at this point of the season, right, Neil or Mark?
Yeah, well, it probably won't be after next week, right?
No.
Because Ohio State and Indiana play. One thing that I would say, Riley, is that Penn State has done a really good job of tuning all of this out. I mean, I know Franklin had some comments afterward where he was talking up the SEC and the Big Ten, and I'm fine with that. But it would be so easy to be overwhelmed and to get caught up in this because of the novelty of it. It's so much fun. I mean, it may be driving people crazy, but people are coming out saying, no, these teams don't belong, these teams do. If you're in the middle of it, that has to be so difficult just to say, you know what, we don't care. Go back to how we started the show, what Neil said. Take care of business. If you win your games, you're going to be fine. If you get distracted, say we should be ranked here, we should be ranked here, and that's what you're going to see. Everybody was complaining about BYU. BYU goes out and doesn't take care of business, and that's what happens.
Shane, just talk a little bit about how difficult it is to maybe tune out all that outside noise and those distractions Mark was talking about.
I mean, obviously you got a lot of coverage, you got social media, you got all that kind of stuff, but I know what he's probably saying. I mean, it's want to know every week.
Yep.
Keep the main thing. All right, you got to take care of what you got to take care of. In the end, you're there to play football, and you're there to play good football. And if all those other things, that will take care of itself. You got to focus on what it is, whether it's watching your tape, whether it's bringing it in practice, like just seeing how your season progresses. Like that's the main thing, and everything else will take care of itself.
They're sort of fortunate because right now they're not on the outside looking in, whereas some of these 2-loss SEC teams that have really come through a gauntlet of a schedule and can make a case that they are at least talent worthy to be in the field, or they're in a situation where somebody's going to get left out who's a really good football team.
It's terrible because the SEC has never gotten the benefit of the doubt in any of these things, right? The SEC has never gotten you know what, they play a tough schedule. I think Franklin is smart. Talk up the Big Ten and the SEC. But other than that, just let it go. And the players are saying absolutely nothing about it, and that's the way to go. That's the way to handle it.
Shane, do you think that Penn State right now is in good position to potentially win a national championship or make it deep into the college football playoff?
I mean, if you look at the field, it's wide open. It's as wide open as it's ever been. Okay, you don't have a Georgia who's way up there like they've been in a couple years, or even like when it was Clemson and Alabama going back a few years, where like clear cut, like those are the top teams. I mean, you got the whole crew of very solid teams. But this is getting down to like almost some like bracketology kind of vibes as far as you don't really know who's going to actually like come out of this thing. And also with the addition of the conference champions getting those buys, you have some teams in the top 4 who you probably aren't putting in the actual top 4. So you might have a tougher first round matchup than an actual semifinal matchup. So there's a lot of factors going on here. I think it's great for the sport because you don't really know in a way that sometimes it's been in the past. But you got to play the games and see how it goes.
Yeah, it's created so much more interest, so much more hope amongst all these fan bases, and the fact that Penn State could be sitting here with a home game on December 20th, 21st.
Well, not only that, what if they get a home game against an SEC opponent, which we know they have never wanted to come up here outside of Bear Bryant and Alabama. Right. They have been almost afraid to come up here.
Especially
imagine,
in December. Yeah.
Right, in mid to late December, how much fun would that be? So I love this whole thing. I know people get wrapped up in it, but I think it's just adding more excitement. More teams are in it, and it makes every week that much more.
It's a shame it took this long, but it's great that it's here.
Absolutely, and I mean, like we said at the beginning of the segment, like Penn State was always going to be the biggest benefactor of it, but right now it doesn't even matter, and that's probably the way James Franklin would like that to.
Well, there's some other benefactors. I mean, here's Indiana.
Yep, exactly. Who would have thought Kurt Cignetti's Hoosiers would be right here, a top 5 team this time of the year? But that's crazy to me right now. But who knows? Next week that all can change.
I mean, they give the guy $8 million a year through like 2031, and he hasn't really had a name win yet. Now he could get one this week.
Do you guys think that NIL and the transfer portals kind of made this a lot more wide open in college football?
Well, I mean, it gives and it takes away, right? Some programs are able to leverage it the way kind of Indiana did, but then you look at Washington and what happened there. Even though they were able to bring all these players in, they go from being a national championship contender to a team that's struggling in the Big Ten in 1 year.
All right, up next on Nittany Nation Overtime, we find out who is the Nitwit of the Week, plus our predictions against Minnesota. We'll have that when we return.
Don't miss a minute of Nittany Nation Overtime, now also on Apple and Spotify. You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Well, I can promise you guys that I'm not the Nitwit of the Week, but let's check out who won, and it is Ryan Risky. Meanwhile, Mark, Brennan, and Neil Rudel remain tied with 2. And Shane, you're going to have to help out our guest here a little bit. You guys are all at the bottom of the standings with 1 correct prediction. Although I'm not one to talk any smack, I'm still looking for my first one today. And I guess with the law of the land, I do have to go first here. I saw that the early spread has Penn State as an 11.5-point favorite against Minnesota. I'm picking Penn State to win 31-13. Neil?
Wow, you're going big, Riley. And hey, you guys, the 3 of you now have us by 3. I think Penn State's got to get to the national final for us to have a chance.
The Senior Bowl may come into play. The Senior Bowl may come into play.
No pressure. Hey, talk about taking care of business. This looked like this could be a potential landmine. We saw that a few years ago. They went up there with an undefeated team, and Minnesota rode the boat on them. So I think it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle. Minnesota doesn't score a lot, though. I'm going to say Penn State 31, Minnesota 23.
All right, Mark?
Yeah, listen, I've watched this Minnesota team. In the last game I saw, they played Rutgers and just struggled to run the ball at all. And I think if you're a one-dimensional team, and that's so anti what Minnesota used to be, where they ran it against everybody. A one-dimensional team's going to really struggle against this Penn State defense. They're playing at an elite level. So I'm going to stick with the 31 that everybody's going with. I'm going to go 31-10.
Whoa.
All right, Shane?
Okay, I'm going to go even bigger. I'm saying this is the time. This is the decisive win on the road. We're going 35-7 with a defensive touchdown in there.
Wow.
Awesome. I think it's going to be a close first half. I just think Penn State's going to end up pulling away here in the second half.
Okay, I'm
of the
low.
game.
I'm well positioned here.
Yeah, no, you're in a good position, Neil. We'll see if you could add to that, take a lead over Mark over here. Well, that's all the time that we have for Nittany Nation Overtime. Special thank you goes out to former Penn State quarterback Shane McGregor for joining us. And, of course, always joining us, Neil Rudel and Mark Brennan. For myself, Riley Holsinger, have a great rest of your night, everyone.
Thanks for watching WTAJ's Nittany Nation Overtime.